to put yourself in a position to be one of the first people to get hired is to treat every experience that you have like it's an interview. So when you are observing in a classroom, you dress up, you don't wear a hat, you're not hungover, you're not falling asleep. All of these things happen more often than you can imagine.
All things you want from your students.
All things that you want for your students, yes. Yeah, that's true. So, you know, those things that you they present yourself professionally, things like that. And then as you get more involved in a school or in a classroom, to really get involved. So when you're student teaching or when you're doing your practicum, you go to the plays, you go to the games, you go to after-school events, you might show up at a DECA something. Sorry, I didn't do DECA, so I don't really event. You know, go out on the playground. You do need your lunchtime and you do need your plan time. You don't spend all of your time doing that, but you know, you interact with the kids. You're standing out in the hallways. You're greeting them as they walk through the door every day. You're making yourself known and you're making yourself really almost invaluable. So you offer to go to a dance and chaperone a dance. You offer to go on a field trip. You grade papers instead of just sitting back at the back of the room. When you're in the lunchroom, you're not part of the complaining group, right? There's one of those, for those of you, in many lunchrooms, and teachers absolutely need to vent. That's why Friday afternoons is a very popular time for teachers outside of the building. And that's fine, but you don't do that when you're trying to get a job. You're treating it, you know, like you would an interview. You're positive, you're enthusiastic, and you're really making yourself part of the school. And I think that's what is going to set you apart, even if you don't, you know, you on paper you might not feel like you look that different. You're going to be really different if you do those things. And I really encourage you to do that. People will talk about you, and even if there's not an opening at that school, they're going to talk to their friends, because that's what principals do, is they get on the phone with each other, or they get on the phone with me, and they say, I don't have an opening, or we needed someone with a master's degree in linguistically diverse or something like that, but this person you have to take a look at because they're so good. And that happens all the time during hiring season. If they're not fighting with each other, they're sharing people fighting over you, then they are sharing your name. So
I'll piggyback on that. Not only do you want to act like a teacher the entire time, but also outside of the classroom. Okay, so if you are, I can't tell you how many times I've been to King Soopers or wherever with my daughters, and they're like, Dad, that's my student teacher in music or whatever. And so know that teaching is one of those professions that even when you're off the clock, you're still kind of on the clock. Okay, you're going to run into students at the grocery store. You're going to run into parents at the bank, or you know, whatever it may be. And I'm not saying you guys can't have a life outside of work, but be conscious of that. Okay, you know, be aware that your actions outside of work can be seen by your students, can be seen by the parents. Okay, even as a student teacher. Okay, some of my daughter's greatest relationships have been with student teachers, and you know, it's that outside of work stuff that where we run into them and they come up and they greet my daughters and they know their names, and you know, then when I see that person at a job fair, you better believe I'm putting them at the front of the line, okay? Because they've impressed me on paper, but I've seen them and they've impressed me in person. Okay, so be aware of that, not only when you're in the schools and at those events, but also outside of work too.
And especially on social media. So now is the time to lock down your accounts, to make them private. Just this week, I had a very uncomfortable conversation with someone about their Facebook page that had a pretty questionable video about, maybe you've seen it, how hot versus how crazy a woman is and how you can pick the right, it was on an X and Y axis even, so it looked scholarly, but it wasn't. But also they were friends with both current students and an adult film star. It's not really the image that we expect of our teachers, and the kids notice. They really do notice. So please make sure that you lock down your accounts right now, and that you encourage your friends to not tag you, because that's, or whatever you call it on all the other things, that's usually what happens is someone, you know, you show up on someone else's. So I hate to be a total buzzkill, but you are going to be teachers, so you need to do that, especially especially your friends, sorry.
And how many of you have Googled yourselves? Yeah, if you haven't, try it. See what shows up.
And Dr. Warren has heard me say this before, and it's along with their speaking to. You need to protect your brand, right? You need to protect your brand because to Dr. Warren's point, people can Google you, they can Facebook stalk you, they can find you very, very easily. You want to protect your brand. And it's not just at the grocery store, because it's how they can be sitting at home and stalking you. Let's see what Miss So-and-so is up to. And you want to make sure that whatever they find is something you would be proud of, that your mother and father would be proud of, and that your principal would be proud of. How's that for a frame?
Yeah, sorry to be.
And I also want to add, when you are in the school districts, actually, when you get in trouble and the school say, we don't want this student, teacher, or what is teacher candidate to come back to the school, guess what? We don't question the school districts. You're out. You're just out. Okay, that's because here at UNC, we are not only responsible for you as our students, we are also obligated to be responsible for the children you are working in the classrooms. Okay, so that's why, and behind these children are the parents. Okay, it's not like in some other schools on campus here, their responsibility is 100% for you. We shoulder double responsibilities. Okay, so that's how important it is, how you really present yourself while you are in the school districts.
Do any of you have questions for these guys? They're here. They're here for you. There's a question.
What's your stance on applicants with tattoos?
For us, this just came up at a meeting actually this week or last Friday. We're really fine with it as long as it's something that you could wear on a T-shirt also. So probably not a weapon or an unclothed person. But I mean, really, I think we did have an applicant. I know, we're no fun, are we? But really, I mean, I think I'm personally okay. I think most of our principals seem pretty open about it. I mean, I'm sure that there are some principals who aren't, but
that's different from district to district and
Sure.
school to school. So how would you know if it's okay in a particular school?
And I would add that the world has kind of moved on from tattoos being taboo. That's not an issue for me, not an issue for our hiring principals. I won't ask the folks standing up here whether or not they have tattoos, but I do. It would be really difficult for me to be hard on folks who have tattoos. It's become much more mainstream. When I'm off duty, I like to pretend I'm a biker. So I've got a couple of tattoos or three.
what we actually talked about was piercings, and piercings, I think it's sort of the same as long as your students are going to be okay with, as long as they could wear it, you could wear it in our district, except for, you got to think about if they could be pulled out. So if you're working with kindergartners who are trying to hug you all the time and pulling you, or kids with extensive needs that sometimes might get a little bit angry or violent, you want to be really careful, so that might sort of eliminate you, but generally speaking, I think.
But Google the faculty picture from a school you're interested in and make sure you have the right tattoos and enough piercings to fit in with their culture.
But I would add, for several years running, we have a teacher in one of our elementary schools who has had the highest growth rate in reading, and he has sleeved up both arms. And it's just, parents want the best experience for their kids. They want their kids to grow and learn, and for our community, it's not been an issue.
That said, you never know what you're going to get when you walk into an interview, so if you can,
Covered up.
go on the conservative side in terms of, on your first day or on your first interview, you might want to.
I can't remember, it was Dr. Wong that said where you kind of overdress that first day until you kind of know. I would say that kind of same thing. Our expectation in our district is if it's not okay for the kids, then it's not okay for the staff, in terms of dress code and all those kind of things. So I can't come to work with a beer shirt on or something like that. So our students can't, so our staff is the same way.
From the beginning of the hiring process, can you walk us through how a job is posted, how that's put out to the public, and then sort of from calling people for interviews and what that process looks like from start to
for us, we will start to post in the spring. Okay, so typically around spring break time, once we know what the state budget and all that kind of stuff looks like, we'll start to post positions in the spring. Usually could be as early as March, but April sometimes. We'll post it on our website, and it kind of goes out to some other websites. From there, the principals screen the applicants, and they will do all the interviewing. They'll select their final candidate, then they'll call HR. We'll check credentialing, licensure, background check, all those kind of things. And then we'll kind of give them the thumbs up if it's okay or thumbs down. For us, anyway, the principal makes the final decision because they know the culture they're building and who would be the best fit. We just make sure they meet all the qualifications.
Well, actually, you do get information because from time to time we also get the request from school districts. We post it right away. We send it to the listserv to all of you. And also UNC has the annual job fair in the fall, I think. No, in the
Both
spring.
semesters.
Both semesters. We have
Teacher
2
employment
job
days.
fairs. And all of you will be notified. And you'll be told how you prepare for the job fair, this and that. So you'll get tons of information regarding the opportunities to get hired.
So we all post online now. Everything's posted online, I think, everywhere. And you can go and you can click on the jobs you're interested in. Our application includes a confidential reference form, so you enter an email address of 3 different people who have seen you teach or who know you as a person, and then it comes back to us, so we really look at those to see what they're saying about you. And in our district, I look through the lists and I kind of pre-screen and I pick out people who I've either met at a job fair or cooperating teachers have called me. Your professors occasionally call and say, you've got to look at this person, something like that. And then I'll send those names specifically to the principals. But generally, we can have, well, I don't think this year we had 400 for any of the elementary jobs, but we have in the past had up to 400 people apply. This year was more like 200 for some of the very early positions in elementary. So, it really does pay to have your cooperating teachers call us or have the principals call us to get your name out there, which happens a lot. And I would take things like, do you still do a teacher work sample or something like that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So everyone hates that, right? Teacher work sample, it's such a pain, it's so much work.
Sometimes it's called a capstone project, but it's the
Okay.
same idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would take that more seriously than you think you might need to, because that's where your interview question answers are gonna come from. So a lot of people who have been teaching for a long time, they don't even know what they do. They just do it. It's natural. It's like riding a bike for them. But you have the added, or I think the advantage that you are thinking about your teaching. Whereas, teachers don't do that. So you can think about things like your capstone project or your teacher work sample. You can think about things like a job fair where you're like, oh, I'll never get any interviews and everyone looks the same. We're all wearing these black suits and we all, say the same things, but that's not true. So take those things more seriously than you think you need to, because we are really, really are looking at you. And the very best thing, and we'll probably talk about this when we come to your senior class or when you're getting ready to interview, practice interviewing. Everyone spends hours on their resumes and hours on their cover letters and no time practicing interviews, but you would never go skiing down a really big hill without practicing. You'd never try a new sport, in a professional setting without practicing, right? But nobody ever practices interviews. So sit down with someone who loves you and is able to give you some feedback and just practice. Or I always recommend practice in your car. Just have an envelope or a bucket of questions, pick one out, read it at a light, and then answer it. Just practice, practice, practice. I know it's painful and horrible, like any role playing is, but it really makes a difference.
And I would add, we all want to get it right? So teaching is one of those unique professions. We decide we're going to be together for a year, right? We commit, We offer the position, you all sign a contract, and then we're gonna spend about 10 months together unless things really go south, right? Unlike probably any job you've ever had, where if it doesn't work out, you give 2 weeks notice and then you go on your merry way. We want to get it right. We want you to stay because you've got young men and women that need you. That's hard on kids when there's a change in teachers, maybe those types of things. We've gone to kind of a different way of screening. Our timelines are very similar. We're all online. We have now for about 10 years committed to making our renewal decisions for probationary staff prior to spring break, which makes for an awkward last couple of months, but we let folks that are probationary know whether or not they're going to be back the following year for a couple of reasons. We want to give them an opportunity to hit the teacher fairs that are going on around the state so they can find employment for the fall, although it's not going to be with us, but also so we can get out ahead and post positions. And then most of our principals, we haven't mandated it, but we like it so much that most principals have gone to a screening process that's in person. It's lovingly referred to as speed dating. I don't like that moniker, but that's how it's referred to. But we bring in 12, 15, sometimes as many 20 candidates at a time. We have an investment from all of our buildings in, usually a dozen or so folks at our table, and then we do a round robin screen. They get about 3 minutes at a table, brief introduction, and then someone is asking them one question, and then the screeners move so the candidates can not have to do with all that shuffling. But the feedback we get from candidates is they really get to know the school. So we want to, again, everyone looks alike on paper, so we screen them, and from that pool of 12, 15, or 20, they go do a more traditional teacher or a panel interview of maybe 6 or 8, and then again with us, principals make that final decision. But I couldn't stress enough the comment about practicing the interview process, because I'm always amazed at how ill-prepared some folks are when they come to interview, whether they're, sometimes even principal candidates say, wow, I didn't prepare for that. Practice, practice, practice. It is a skill. I would encourage you to do that. And someone you love, someone that loves you unconditionally, can give you some pretty direct feedback that you'll still be okay with in the morning. Not a complete stranger that'll give you feedback and you'll be mad at them. So, yeah, practice, practice, practice.
Good question.
Would you consider getting a master's degree an endorsement or law for education?
So if the question really is, if I get a master's degree, am I not going to be hired because I'm more expensive? The answer is no. That has no bearing on our hiring. I'm sure they do the same way. We have an average cost of a teacher. For us, it's about $75,000, $80,000 in salary and benefits. So that FTE allocation is for that amount. And we end up hiring enough folks that are on this side of the scale, then the other, it balances out. But it has no bearing. Never in my 25 years have I made a decision on, well, she has a doctorate, she's a little more expensive, so we're not going to hire her. I've never done that. I can't speak for you guys. But, dispel that myth. You want to get a master's, go get it.
So I'm in like a program where you like student teach for 6 weeks abroad and then 6 weeks here. Is that right?
It depends.
Okay.
Yeah, it all depends. Right now we have, I don't know if the person, do we have somebody in Ireland now?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one person in Ireland.
2, I think.
And, okay, 2 are in China. And I know the 2 in China, they'll do it the whole now one elementary, one music, and they are teaching my music. He has to teach music to ESL students. Every single one is ESL. So he has to use English to teach music to Chinese students. And that's the ESL experience.
Do it. There is nothing like international travel to change everything about you, everything about your worldview and about your teaching is so, I think it's one of the best
Unless
things
it's
in the
a
world.
country that wouldn't allow you to teach certain subject, then probably you have to come back for 8 weeks. So it depends.
Okay.
We had a student teacher whose student taught in Spain last year, and she hasn't come back. She got a job, she's still teaching there, we don't know how long she'll stay.
No,
but
no,
she's
we wanted
having
to
a
come
laugh.
back. Colorado needs
Sorry,
you.
yeah, we do. I'm sorry. These 2 are like, Allie, what are you doing? But just come make sure you come back in a year or 2.
Come on, it's a great experience.
Do it now, yeah, and then come back. Right.
So if we like student teach internationally, we do our full student teaching there, and then we come back and want a job here, you're gonna say, well, you didn't student teach in Colorado, so I don't think you have any experience. Is that gonna be something that holds us back, or is that something that you like?
We have to follow all the rules in Colorado, even we send them abroad, actually. We have to take the schools very carefully.
Okay.
Yeah, typically we pick the schools that use the Western curriculum.
And have support for you, right? I mean, you're really
Oh, yes,
careful about
yes,
that.
yes.
You don't want to just
Yeah.
go somewhere.
No, we don't just throw you out
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
So I've heard that if you become a student teacher, that you have a more likely chance of getting hired, or substitute teacher. You have a more likely chance of getting hired in that school district. Is that true?
It's a really good way to get your name out there and to get people to know you, especially if you use those days where you're subbing, just like I described, bless you. You know, you're grading papers, you're interacting with the kids, you're offering to cover other classes, you're in the lunchroom with the other teachers, and yeah, it's great. Especially, how many of you will graduate or finish your student teaching in December and then have that second semester? If you're not going abroad during that semester, then do sub, or get a para job. That's another really good way. Are your para job applications down a lot this year too?
Yeah.
Yeah, we desperately need paras, so if you don't get a teaching job, you can do that too.
And we desperately need subs too, so.
Yeah, desperately need subs.
So I have a question / comment. So a lot of the UNC candidates are putting themselves through school. So they're very busy. They work. They're funding their own education. So they don't have a lot of time to volunteer in organizations that would help them lead to a good position in your district. So how much time is enough to volunteer? How many years do they really need to put on a resume? And what particular volunteer experiences have stood out within your district? And so, for instance, in Greeley, I think of things like the Global Refugee Center and the library system and ABC After School Daycare. Is 1 hour every Saturday going to be enough to say, hey, this candidate has really committed to this experience and therefore they are viable?
To me, it's less about the amount of time. It's, you know, did they do it for the last 4 years or 2 years, and where did they do it? You know, if you're at the Boys and Girls Club or the Global Refugee Center, something like that, something that's going to be relevant to our students, that's going to have a huge impact. You know, if you just did it for the last 6 weeks right before your interview, probably not as much. But if we can see you've been doing it for several years, you know, you're kind of committed to that, you know that student population, that's what's more important to us.
Thank you.
And I would say if folks have the opportunity to volunteer, that's wonderful. I would be equally impressed, or even more so, when kids have put themselves through school. You know, I spent 10 months at Montfort. Remember Montfort, Colorado? So I was on the FAB line working out there between school and,
Wow.
I mean, to me, that speaks to their work ethic and their desire to get through school. So I mean, if they're fortunate enough to be able to volunteer, that's great, but the work experience, I think, is equally as important. Military experience is great. I'd like to hire veterans.
We have time for one more question.
Would it be more marketable if you were to say, be a volunteer coach for a sport? So you would be like a music teacher and then you would also be like a cheer coach or something?
Yes. And you know, we often have coaches who split either a stipend or a volunteer. So it would be really hard, I think, while you're student teaching and working to coach, especially at a high school. Those seasons are so long, but you can split it. You know, like if we have different days off in the afternoon, we could say we'll be one coach. And so yeah, we also need coaches really badly too. Or just go out and say, I want to help every Monday and Tuesday, or
I have a question.